Hello, Star Trek fans. Welcome to ReBinge It. This is the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we are rebinging Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 2, Episode 4, Elogium. This episode aired September 18th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about last week's episode, Projections?
That was really good episode. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was a good one. After two lackluster episodes to start the season, that one was good.
And we had a longer discussion after the podcast about how it could have been about addiction.
Yes. Did we talk about it in the podcast or no?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit more. It is quite a dark view of the episode.
Yeah, but normally I'm the one who's supposed to be upbeat.
Well, every now and then we do latch on to do something dark. It's because any story that you watch or read, you connect to in your own way. A person can write it thinking that it's whatever it means to them, but once it's outside of their head, it's in somebody else's head and turns into something totally different.
That is very true.
Well,
yes. Speaking
Speaking of lackluster episodes, you have the notes.
I might have leaked my opinion on this one last week.
This is, shall we say, not a classic. But we must talk about it. The show must go on. We've committed
Yes, indeed.
to watching the show,
Yeah.
good or bad.
I unfortunately had to do the notes.
I don't think I could have done it. I really struggled to get through the second time. There's only one time where I had to fast forward, and I'll let you know when we get there. You can maybe guess what it was.
Okay, so thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What?
No cheating.
Okay, off we go. We open with Chakotay running into a couple kissing in the turbo lift, and they seem very embarrassed by this. Chakotay describes it to Tom and Kes, who join him in the turbo lift, as indiscreet shipboard fraternization. And that actually made me laugh. That was pretty funny.
And Tom says he's sorry he missed it. That was also quite funny.
Why? Do you like watching that kind of thing, Tom?
It seemed right for Tom.
Yeah. In the mess hall, Tom is helping Kes deliver vegetables, and Neelix is being a desperately insecure teenager and is extremely jealous about Kes and Tom. And do we have to deal with this already?
I mean, it's hard to watch, right?
Yeah.
It just makes me hate this character.
It's like, are you a child?
He acts like a child, but this is a 40-year-old man playing this part. So it is a terrible look on him, a terrible look on this character, and not a great look for Star Trek.
Yeah, it could work if he was a teenager, but...
Or if they were both the same age, because...
Yeah, there you go.
The actor's nearly twice the age of Kes. So it comes across as so horrible.
Yeah. Well, Neelix eventually gets annoyed at all of this and calling Kes such an innocent. I don't know what they're aiming at here, but if it was bad, cringy soap opera, they're nailing it.
This doesn't even work on soap operas. This is really more like what happens in a high school.
Oh, off to the bridge.
Wait, you're going to skip the beetle?
Yeah.
I'm only going to bring up the beetle because Neelix finds a beetle in the cabbage. Kes picks it up, all excited to find a beetle, and then just puts it down on the floor in the mess hall, in the kitchen, which already has an F rating, and they just leave it there.
I didn't notice that.
Yes.
Are they just beetles running? Oh, maybe she could have put the beetle into one of the air vents so it could run all over the ship.
Oh, that's a better idea.
Yeah.
I just thought it was so funny that they just left it in the kitchen.
Off to the bridge, and they have discovered a strange energy configuration. So they head off to investigate. And again, this is the piece of Trek I just love. They're in the back end of nowhere, 80 years from home, and they're still interested in shiny objects.
But should they be?
Now this I can really relate to.
But every time we get interested in a shiny object, we nearly lose control of the ship. Everybody almost dies, but we keep doing it.
I feel this is very Trek. The exploration discovery is such an important thing.
Yeah.
Also on the bridge, Chakotay grasses up the kissing couple to Janeway. wondering if they should set some kind of policy regarding fraternization. Janeway, being something of a realist, points out that Starfleet doesn't regulate this, and how they're a long way from home. People will start to pair off, or other alternatives, depending on species. I don't know. I do feel Chakotay, having had Starfleet experience and training, would know about these policies. Or is he just being overly cautious in this very specific situation that they're in?
But it's even just common sense.
Yeah.
You can't stop something like that. It's going to happen, especially in the situation that they're in. But I can see that maybe he's not sure if they should do something about it. But it is funny to think, oh yeah, we're going to try to control it. No, it's just not going to work.
So you think it was really an abundance of caution on Chakotay's part?
Yeah, it seemed weird, but...
Well, especially as it's sort of established on Star Trek.
Well, we talked about this before. If you have a relationship that goes wrong and, really wrong, so that the people can't work together anymore or be in the same room, there's nowhere to go. You can't assign the person to a different ship because there's no other ship. So I can see why you might be nervous about it, but it would make more sense to me to say, hey, we ought to talk about this rather than just, we ought to establish a policy. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. I mean, look at Carol Marcus, ended up on the other side of the galaxy to avoid Kirk.
That's right.
Also, I feel in this scene there's something of a nod to Picard here, where Janeway makes the comment about a personal relationship isn't something a captain has the luxury of. Also, I think that's probably just good management as she's the captain. And I feel this speaks to an extent to my view of Picard as this space monk in his role as the captain.
Well, Janeway has it certainly worse than any other captain because as the leader of this ship, there's nobody who doesn't report to her. Yeah. She's in charge of everything. So it could be catastrophic for her to start fraternizing with someone.
Yeah.
But I don't think she's like the space monk that Picard was. I wonder if with Picard it was because it was a reaction to Kirk, the character of Kirk, and how a lot of fun was made of him and how he was sleeping with every alien that they ran into, which is comically ridiculous. And then they were maybe trying to show, hey, see, we're more serious, right? Because that captain didn't leave the ship. He was a very serious, straightforward captain, much more by the book.
It was almost like a religious calling.
Yeah, so I think that could have just been a reaction to it, but ultimately they used that with that character, that he struggled to connect to other people and that even he struggled to connect to his own family. It bled into the Picard series. It became a really important part of the character. And here with Janeway, again, they don't quite know what to do with her because they give her the boyfriend at the beginning, poor Mark. And you get here and you're like, well, they had her flirt with that one terrible alien, which made no sense. But at the same time, she's got no options on the ship because anything could be catastrophic for her as the leader.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But I don't think she's the space monk that Picard was.
Oh, no, I don't see her in that way. But I see a call to that with her saying it's something she can't do in this situation.
Oh, I just feel bad for Mark. He's looking after her dog. And I mean, how is he ever going to upgrade from Janeway? He's never going to find a better girlfriend. It's all downhill for him.
It would be pretty tough.
Yep.
They now arrive at the anomaly and discover it's a space-borne life form. And naturally, they have to get in closer to investigate.
Well, it's a bunch of life forms.
Yes, it's a whole swarm that kind of look like krill, the little sea creatures.
Yeah, it looks like something you would see in looking through a microscope.
Oh, yeah, good point. Meanwhile, in the hydroponics bay, Kes is tending to the plants and starts almost absent-mindedly eating a container of the pollination beetles while she works.
She's just stuffing them in her mouth, handfuls at a time. It was so grotesque.
And the crunching. Oh. And the music here was actually great because they throw in these disquieting tones to show something's off. And then when she realizes what she's doing, like she's eating the beetles, they do this crazy close-up shot of her holding the beetles and looking shocked. And she's almost cross-eyed. They've got so close. And off into a very dramatic ad break.
I had to fast forward. It was gross.
You know what was running through my mind when I watched this?
What's that?
Not so much fun for the Beatles.
Oh, God. That was funny.
Grand Nagus quote from Deep Space Nine.
Yes.
And finally, we get into the opening credits. Now, that has to be one of the weirdest or grossest cold opens in Star Trek.
Yeah, not a fan.
On the bridge, they're examining the creatures, and we meet a new member of the crew who's rocking a kind of a blonde version of Janeway's bun, but with a little bit more flair.
Yeah, it's not great.
We don't get a name, though, at this point.
Not now, but we do learn it later.
Yeah. Everyone seems amazed by these little creatures, and Chakotay seems extremely interested in them.
And they don't seem that interesting.
Yeah. Back to Kes, who's in her quarters and absolutely chowing down, like Pookie the cat kind of chowing down.
Oh, there's food. I must eat it.
Yeah.
She's double fisting it.
And strangely, she tries hiding this later from Neelix.
Yeah.
Well, Neelix has come in to apologize, and he's brought her a gift of some flowers. And, abuser behavior here?
Well, he's come to apologize, but then he doubles down on his jealousy and stupidity.
Yes.
Somebody needs to offer him counseling on this, not on the things that he's asking about.
Right. I think that would be good.
Stop being a dick.
And he describes Kes again as a naive, sheltered young woman.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I find this really kind of disturbing. It's almost like a controlling behavior.
Mm-hmm. The jealous person always says, oh, it's not that I don't trust you, it's the other person.
Well, Neelix accidentally discovers the food that Kes has been eating, and she says it's mashed potatoes with butter, and she's eaten 6 bowls of it. Plus, she's been adding some extra dirt to it.
And when she says how great it is, Neelix again sticks his finger in her food. Why does he do that?
Because he's a child.
Although he's quite horrified when she says she's adding dirt to it.
Yes. And all the while, she continues to eat and is munching down on an apple, like absolutely starvingly furiously.
This is where we learn Ensign Wildman's name. Because Kes said that that was her recipe for mashed potatoes.
Neelix is very concerned by this behavior and calls sickbay. She, however, does not want to go, saying she's fine, and Neelix actually has to pick her up and carry her there.
And him carrying her out with her eating everything, including the flowers that he gave her, was actually very funny.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yep.
Back to the bridge, and Voyager is still following the space slice, and Janeway orders to back off, give them a little bit more room, but Voyager starts accelerating, and Tuvok determines the creatures are generating their own EM resonance field. They're creating a magnetic wake and pulling the ship towards them.
And we've lost control of the ship again.
The shields are non-operational, and now they're pulled into the swarm of space bugs. Janeway asks B'Elanna for some ideas to get them out without using the warp engines, because they don't want to hurt them. B'Elanna naturally has an idea that involves using the deflector, which is probably the most useful piece of kit in Star Trek. I think we need to look up how many different problems have been solved by using the deflector.
Yeah, it's true. It does have, endless uses.
Plus, you can use them to make interplexing beacons for contacting the Borg.
It's the Swiss Army knife. I do like how every time we call B'Elanna, she has an idea.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And then, of course, Janeway's always like, do it. I don't want to think about it or talk about it. Just do it.
B'Elanna, have you tested this? Do we have any simulations to show it works?
No, none of that.
So do you think ideation appears high on B'Elanna's skills test?
Yeah, probably.
In sickbay, Neelix is freaking out as the doctor tells him Kes has not been poisoned. The doctor reports she has elevated electrophoretic activity in her nervous system, probably caused by the space bugs that they're studying. Neelix continues to be a little bit of an overbearing problem, and the doctor actually has to throw him out of sickbay. And in the background, we also see Kes is really sweaty again.
Yeah, this seems to be a theme. It's happened to her before. Yeah, it seems like she has a fever, and this is just the beginning. She looks bad here, but it gets worse, and then it never ends. Through the whole episode, I feel bad for the actress.
Oh, dear. After being thrown out of sickbay, Neelix immediately goes to whine to the captain, and in an amazing sign of fortitude, Janeway does not throw him out of the nearest airlock.
And sadly, she doesn't roll her eyes at him.
No.
But she does ignore him completely.
Yeah.
At least she's ignoring him until he says that Kes is ill. And then she's like, oh, Kes is ill? She doesn't even look at him
right.
until he says that. And then suddenly she's interested. She also gives Chakotay a look like, are you not going to deal with this? And he does nothing. He's so useless.
Can you throw him out of an airlock?
Why did you let him on the bridge?
Did somebody tell him the code for the panel again?
I imagine Chakotay's like, this guy's your fault. I didn't invite him to stay on the ship. You deal with him.
Janeway is now concerned or interested in how the creatures are affecting Kes, and the doctor calls to ask her to come to sickbay. And we see Kes has locked herself in the doctor's office, at least put up a force field, and she appears to be delirious. She's just sitting on the desk whimpering and even more sweaty than she was previously.
And she's kind of rocking back and forth. She looks absolutely wild.
Yes. The doctor thinks this is being caused by the electrophoretic levels caused by the bug swarm, and in a wonderful piece of understatement says, I think we should leave immediately.
Yeah, thanks.
The doctor has also discovered a strange growth on Kes's back. Janeway then manages to talk Kes into lowering the force field, and Kes immediately just runs and hugs Janeway. Kes explains the thing growing on her back is a mitral sac where the Ocampa child would grow, and she's going through the Elogium, where her body prepares for fertilization. So, on the back, wouldn't that make, sitting down impossible?
Yeah, it doesn't seem convenient. Okay, I have two things to say.
Okay.
First, the doctor says that the growth he saw on Kes's back wasn't there the last time he examined her. What's he doing examining Kes's back? I'd like to know. And why isn't Neelix yelling about that? He's yelling about everything else. And then the second thing I'd like to say is that Janeway basically tells her that it's like puberty, but she's acting like a wild animal, not like a teenager. So I just thought that was fun.
I don't know, teenagers can go pretty wild.
But not feral.
Yeah, this does seem a little bit more feral, yeah.
Yeah. Although she's only like that in this one scene.
Talking to Janeway, Kes is kind of freaking out because she's far too young for this. It shouldn't happen for another 3 years. Janeway says they'll help her through this. But Kes continues, this only happens once in an Ocampa life. If she's ever going to have a child, it has to be now.
The species is a mess.
I know. Designing a race that only lives for 7 or 9 years, it has to be the dumbest thing Star Trek has ever done.
Well, yeah. And
Did anybody think this all the way through?
And try to make them part of a story. It's one thing if they would have run into a planet or something and met the people, but it's so silly.
Yeah, because then you can wave your hand at all the rest of the life cycle and everything else and go, oh yeah, we didn't cover that. But here, you've got to actually think up really bad ideas to try and keep it going.
Yes.
On the bridge, they're still being pulled along by the swarm of pink space shrimp. Or are they king prawns?
Amoebas.
In her ready room, Janeway is discussing the Kes situation with Chakotay, and he brings up that it may be necessary for the crew to have children. Because of the length of time the journey will take to get home, they'll need a replacement crew in about 35 years. We're into generationship territory here.
Yeah.
I found this really interesting because I love how Janeway says, who'd have thought we'd be considering a generational ship when we were on a 3-week mission?
Yeah.
I really like this sort of idea here that they're starting to have to think about some of the really big issues.
Right.
You can't run this crew for 80 years. A good proportion of them might die through natural aging.
Yeah, this conversation is good. It's one of the few good ones that take place in this episode.
Yes.
And I noticed that Kate Mulgrew in this scene, she does quite a bit of variety on volume when she's speaking, to the point that when she's being dramatic, she's sort of whispering. And that reminded me of, there's been some criticisms of Sonequa Martin Green on Discovery about her whispering and how I've seen people call that overacting or bad acting. And it's just like, okay, so why is it great when Kate Mulgrew does it and then it's not great when Sonequa Martin Green does it? It's just so stupid. The criticisms of Discovery drive me crazy because they apply to every other show.
Right.
But I guess, I don't know. We didn't have the same forums.
It seems at times people are looking for things to hate on Discovery.
I know, it really frustrates me. It's like, just go watch something else.
The conversation continues, and Janeway, being the great captain, starts thinking of the bigger picture.
Right.
Long-term childcare. How to raise the next generation safely on the starship. I thought that was really great, again, thinking strategically. What does this mean in the big terms? And starting to have that conversation. And at the end of the scene, do we really get a resolution of anything here?
No, not really. They just kind of recognize that it's a problem and maybe that there's absolutely nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, it's something that's going to happen.
Yeah.
We're just going to have to accept it.
Yeah.
For me, this is probably one of the best scenes in the episode.
Yeah. There's really 2 or 3 conversations that are good. This is one of them. I also laughed in this scene when Chakotay keeps blowing on his, I don't know what he has. If he has soup or tea or something, but it's clearly cold. There's no steam. He just doesn't want to drink it.
Off to sickbay, and Kes is telling Neelix she wants him to be the father of her offspring. Neelix seems kind of blindsided by this, and they discuss the issue of safety and raising a child on the starship. And in some ways, it's a little bit of a parallel to what Janeway was saying at the end of the last scene. And just to make things a little grosser, Kes shows Neelix her sticky hands, saying that if they go through with this, they must stay bonded for 6 days. And she only has 2 days and needs an answer from Neelix. And my answer is, Kes, you can do so much better.
Yeah. My answer is, Kes, I'm begging you, find a better boyfriend. The orange goop, though, on her hands it's like that was the last straw. Like, we stepped over into nonsense when she holds up her hands and you're like, I mean, it just looks like they just put stuff on her hands. It doesn't look like it, was something that was coming out of her. It was so comical. And now she's got dark rings under her eyes. She's just drenched with sweat.
Yeah. Well, they also have lenses in her eyes as well, to do the color.
Yeah, her eyes look all different, and it's crazy, this scene.
Fortunately, this scene ends with Neelix saying he'll come back later with an answer.
Honestly, it seems good that he's going to take time to think about it. That's maybe the only good thing.
That's okay. I'll take that. If we're looking for a positive here, that's the one thing. Okay.
That's the one thing, yes.
Yeah. Now in the mess, we see Neelix is very distracted and ends up seeking advice from Tuvok on parenthood. I would say probably a good person, seeing as he has 4 children.
Yeah.
And he does seem to give very good, if dispassionate, advice. I liked how Tuvok says he finds his children taking up a significant portion of his thoughts, and how he experiences neither joy nor sorrow, but believes it is possible. And that made me laugh, because I'm like, oh, that's the Vulcan hiding the fact that, yes, I do love and appreciate my children. But he couldn't say that.
Right. No, I thought it was handled pretty well for a person who isn't supposed to have emotions.
Yes.
Yeah, it still had some heart in it.
Right. And again, Tim Russ managing to put emotion into a dispassionate performance.
Yeah. Definitely.
Wonderful. There does seem to be a little bit of Neelix demonstrating traditional gender roles here, though.
Yeah, he says he could really teach a boy something. And I wrote in my notes, oh, you could teach a boy how to be a jealous jerk. That's great. That's great for future generations.
Pass on the dysfunction.
But Tuvok, in a very Tuvok way, utters one of maybe the most equality-based lines ever uttered in Star Trek when he said that his daughter can learn just as much from him as his sons. So it's like, come on, Neelix, get with the program.
Yeah.
At the beginning of this scene, I did laugh when Tuvok comes in and he asks what the lunch special is. And Neelix says, I didn't have time to make one, because he's obviously stressed out about this decision. But he said, everybody's really interested in last night's leftovers. And Tuvok says, well, that might be because it's the only thing you have. And I really thought that was funny. It's like, yes, if that's the only thing available, there would be a run on it.
I do like how they managed to remain consistent with Tuvok. They haven't done anything to screw him up, as it were. And the use of language has remained consistent throughout the show to this point.
Yeah, and somehow he really works with Neelix. It's hard to explain because they're so different. Whereas some of the other, maybe it's because the other things, the other relationships we see are sort of about friendship, like Harry and B'Elanna and Tom and Harry.
Right.
And even the Doctor and Kes, and we see them sort of building this relationship. But these two, it's like two people who would not ever build a relationship if they weren't forced to be together. And neither one of them is changing their ways in order to adapt to the other person, but somehow they tend to be what each other needs. It's kind of funny in the writing. I do like that.
That's true. That does seem to be the way it's working.
Mm-hmm. This is the other scene that I thought was pretty good, even though I do think Neelix is a little ridiculous here, but I think the conversation is good.
On the bridge, B'Elanna has gotten the deflector working, which will push the creatures out of the way. But some of them start turning blue and attaching themselves to Voyager.
Uh-oh.
Tuvok then detects a substantial magnetic mass moving towards them, and we get an effect shot of a giant pink blob moving towards Voyager in a sea of space bugs. They now try leaving the swarm, but the larger creature begins following. It emits a plasma burst, and B'Elanna goes straight into Klingon mode, describing this as a hostile move and we should think of responding. Watching on the view screen, Chakotay notices that more of the space bugs are turning blue and attaching to the bigger creature. And Harry informs us that the creature's plasma burst has the same subspace signature as Voyager's warp nacelles. And Janeway figures it out. The small creatures are being attracted to Voyager's emissions as if they were giving off pheromones. So Voyager is a pretty hot-looking spacecraft that space bugs just love.
Yeah, Chakotay jumping to the pheromones. It's a little bit like in that Asteroid of the Dead episode where he was just jumping in with all these ideas of what it meant when he had absolutely no idea. It's a little bit of a Chakotay ridiculous leap. And B'Elanna wanting to just shoot the thing was like Kira, right? Let's just shoot it.
Oh, yeah. Well, Chakotay makes another leap, postulating that the small creatures are mistaking Voyager for a potential mate. Well, now that's tricky.
Yeah. We're going to make baby Voyagers. Maybe that's how they get more shuttles. Baby Voyagers.
Oh, that would explain how they used more shuttles than they left with.
That's right.
They're breeding them in one of the cargo bays.
Wasn't there some other episode where a creature was trying to mate with a starship? Am I making that up?
It sounds familiar, but I don't remember the episode.
Maybe it was just in Lower Decks.
Oh. In Kessa's quarters, Neelix tells her he is ready to be a father, and the entire rest of the quadrant shouts, "No!"
Oh, you're going to skip the next ridiculous conversation?
Yes. There's only so much I can take.
Okay, I will say it because how I said earlier that the goo on Kessa's hands took us over the edge. Well, we are still so far over the edge because now Kess says that somebody has to...
We're at the bottom of the cliff, Kim. We're at the bottom of the cliff.
She says that somebody, preferably a parent, has to massage her feet for an hour so that her tongue will swell before she'll be ready to mate. I mean, where did they get this from? Is there some lizard or something that this is true of? I don't know. Yeah, we are at the bottom of the cliff. And then the other thing in this scene is that Neelix he's unsure if he wants the doctor to be doing this. It's like, okay, jealous idiot. He's a hologram.
Yeah. In sickbay, the doctor is massaging Kessa's feet in a process called the relisson.
Sure.
Kess is having second thoughts about all of this and is thinking about the issues related to having a child on a starship and just having children in general. It's also a good scene because the doctor is approaching this from a very clinical standpoint.
Yes.
Because he talks about some of the other races and how, they have kids. At the same time, he's still trying to be supportive. And it's a very sweet scene, I thought. Because I think Kess is feeling very far from home at this point.
Yeah.
And she's turning to her friend for support, who's the holographic doctor. Well, I like how he's still rolling with it. Again, some more good writing of the doctor.
Well, she's looking for parental advice in this moment. Yeah. And you could read this scene a number of ways. I mean, based on how silly this episode is, you could just write it off, too, pretty easily. But you could also look at it like he's playing the role of a father who just doesn't know how to relate to the daughter.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that in there because she just says, tell me what to do. And he's like, I don't know what you should do.
Right. And he can quote facts about, well, the Breen had kids early and this other race has kids really late.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of how if I would try to talk to my dad and he would just ask me if I changed the oil in my car. It's like, okay, that's the end of that conversation.
Yeah, I like the scene.
She's still a sweaty mess, by the way.
On the bridge, Chakotay has leaped to another conclusion, which is the large creature may see Voyager as a rival.
Yeah.
Janeway orders B'Elanna to generate a short burst of impulse so they can get away from the creature. But this seems to enrage it, and that now starts physically hitting Voyager.
Yeah.
And we go to an effects shot of the giant slug hitting Voyager.
Like with its tail or its back end.
And why was it making whale noises? It's in
Know.
space.
We still have shields.
We said earlier we didn't have shields, but apparently the shields are back.
Yeah.
I think Tuvok reported that the shields were down and now the shields are up.
I don't know.
I'm wondering if maybe the whale song is actually subspace radio emissions.
Or maybe Voyager is just saying, this is what this creature probably sounds like. B'Elanna, though, she's back to attack.
They try launching a probe to distract the big creature, but it doesn't work either. And Tuvok suggests treating the creature in the same way as it's behaving towards Voyager. That might be an appropriate response.
Yeah, he's jumped on Baylana's bandwagon.
Yes. Officer Blondbun suggests that might actually be the correct response that the creature expects. And Janeway orders Tom to bump the creature. And we get an amazingly cheesy FX shot of Voyager slamming into the pink slug, and it's sort of wiggling sideways. It was so odd.
Right.
It looked like a cutscene from like a mid-90s video game.
Yeah, it really did. But wouldn't the deflector intended to stop you from bumping into things?
Yes.
One of its uses?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, maybe they were using the deflector to bump it.
Not in the little cutscene.
They had a limited effects budget.
Okay.
This is the best they could do.
That's fine.
Chakotay, who's just the ideas man in this whole episode, comes up with they should now act in a submissive way. They should roll Voyager and vent plasma residue to make the ship look blue in the same way the small creatures do. Tom rolls the ship as Harry vents plasma residue, and the creatures attached to the hull all start letting go. Tuvok very flatly announces, "It appears we have lost our sex appeal, Captain." Why is the joke coming from
one
Vulcan?
step too far? That should not come from Tuvok.
That should have been a Tom line.
Almost anyone else could have said that. That would have been good from Tom, or Chakotay, or Janeway, or Harry.
I think it would fit with Tom's sense of humor.
Yeah.
Voyager now flies out of the swarm as Janeway jokes to Chakotay, saying, "In the future, if I have questions about mating behavior, I know where to go."
Ew.
And there's a bad sitcom moment as they both sort of laugh.
It made me very uncomfortable. I just think about, would I say anything like that at work? I would not. Thank you very much.
No. In an empty mess hall, Kes has come to see Neelix, who's being very sulky and pouty, which again would fit a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Kes decided not to concede with Neelix. And he's disappointed that he didn't get to be a father, because he says once he decided, he was looking forward to it. Kes tells him to just wait a little longer, as it turns out the electrophoretic field just caused a false Elogium. She says she will probably go through this again when she's older. They're now both on the same page about having children, and they hug. Meanwhile, everybody else on the crew says, "No, for the love of God, don't."
They all breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah. In her ready room, Janeway is recording a log, stardate 48921.3. Any comment, Kim?
No.
She's still concerned about the environment they could provide for any child born on the ship, and Ensign Blonde Bun comes in to see Janeway, whose name we finally learn is Wildman, and she informs Janeway that she's pregnant. She's concerned about it not being the best place to have a baby, but it's all she has left of her husband, who is still on Deep Space Nine when they set off for the mission. Janeway, being the best captain ever, just says, "Congratulations, Ensign." The end.
And the ensign kind of smiles like she wasn't expecting that response, I guess.
Yes.
So we're not exactly sure how much time has passed since the beginning of season 1.
Right.
Although in the last episode, the doctor said 6 months that he had been activated. So she's over 6 months pregnant.
Yeah.
I feel like we didn't quite think the timing through.
Oh, I wonder, could this be another one of those episodes that was supposed to be in season 1 and they moved it?
Maybe. Supposed to air sooner.
Oh.
Because this episode feels like a season 1 of Star Trek episode.
Probably like the 5th episode of the season.
Yeah. I don't quite understand why we're so overly worried about what do we do with kids. We've got the holodecks with apparently separate power that doesn't steal power or resources from the ship. So you can create, you can throw the kids back into one of those old 1800s holo novels that Janeway likes.
Yeah, you could have a holo nanny.
There's their creepy friends right there. Exactly. But I mean, that's where you can put the schools. I'm sure there are educational programs and just you can put them into fake parks. And it doesn't seem that outlandish, but we never even mention that in these conversations.
I'm wondering whether it was more of a safety issue here.
Now that I understand. Yeah. Oh, maybe we should go to overanalysis. Well, I mean, I guess I was being specific to the last scene, which is why I brought it up. But yes, let's go to overanalysis. Do you have any?
I do not have a lot, but following the theme of the safety of the children, etc., you're right. You have the holodeck, so you could organize education and have a more formalized sort of a school environment. But I think the safety issue would come down to they always seem to be getting attacked by someone. Just Starfleet ships generally have problems with aliens doing nasty things to the ships. So you run the risk of kids getting killed in those situations. So it's potentially dangerous.
Yeah.
But would it be any more dangerous than any spacefaring race that has children in space?
Right.
Especially seeing as humanity at this point is very much a spacefaring race.
Well, they allowed it on Enterprise in the Next Generation, of course, but it was a bigger ship with shorter missions or a different mission. This ship was sent out on a 3-week mission and is now on a 70-year mission that it didn't want or that nobody on the crew wanted. So I do get that. But at the same time, you don't have any options. So
no, you don't. You simply don't. You have to.
Yeah.
I mean, that I think is why I like the conversation between Janeway and Chakotay. Again, it would fit in an earlier episode way better of them saying, if we want to get home, we're going to have a generational ship. There will have to be children and another generation coming on board.
Yeah, if you think about it, this episode would have made more sense way back, like episode 4 or 5, in terms of these conversations. Although it would have brought the overall season down, I think. Yeah. But yeah, this should have happened sooner. Mm-hmm.
And my final point, because I just want the episode to be over.
Yeah.
I think the whole Kes Neelix thing is so unbelievably creepy.
Yeah.
It's like disturbing. It would have worked if it had been a father-daughter relationship. Like Neelix was filling in for the father role on this. And then I think you got something. Then I think you really would have something of almost, if you like, an overprotective father. The way this is working, it looks like an abusive boyfriend.
Yeah, we talked about that before, and I definitely think they should have done that. It would have made so much more sense if he felt protective of her because she is sort of a fragile, very young person who shouldn't have a lot of experience out in the world at all because
the camper lived in this cutoff.
These people can't. They can't have a lot of experience out in the world because their lives are so short. So it would have made a lot more sense if he was trying to take care of her rather than, he was going to be in love with her.
Yeah,
agreed. It really is endlessly creepy. And I can't believe when they were doing it that they didn't see how creepy it was.
Yeah.
There's no way anybody thought this wasn't creepy. It's totally creepy. And in these episodes where it's really on display, it's horrifying.
Right. It's disquieting.
Yep.
And that wraps up my overanalysis. Over to you.
It's interesting to me now. I didn't put this in my notes, but I was thinking about it as we've been talking through the episode. Yeah. It's interesting that we never once addressed what would happen with this baby. Would it have a short lifespan like Kes, or would it have a longer lifespan? Because Neelix should have been thinking about that. Because is he setting himself up to have a child that is only going to last for a tiny part of his own life?
Wow.
And is that something that he wants?
Okay.
You really have to think about those kinds of things.
That is horrific. You're having a child that will only last 9 years, if we think of the Acampa.
I mean, you at least got to think about that.
Yeah, if it's part of your species' normal thing, you're going to be dead before the kid is, because you only live 9 years. It's just, it's the circle of life.
Yeah.
But
I mean, nobody wants to outlive their kids.
Wow. That's a really good point. Okay, you think I go dark? That one, I didn't even get that one.
That to me isn't dark necessarily. Yeah. That's something that he should be thinking about, and it should have been part of his conversation even with Tuvok. That scene was pretty good, but they just swept that under the rug like we didn't want to deal with that. That's too hard. So that was interesting.
Wow, you could have made that conversation with Tuvok really in depth there, because Tuvok would address that kind of thing completely dispassionately.
Yes.
That is the nature of the race.
Yeah.
That is simply what will happen.
I could have really added something to that conversation.
Yeah.
I do think, look, there's a lot to criticize in this episode, and we have been criticizing it, and I'm sure it's going to come up again when we get to the rating. But there are some good things that happen. Yeah, we talked about a couple of good conversations, and maybe those conversations could have been better, but they were pretty good.
Agreed.
But I also thought it was interesting, or maybe realistic, that Kes, in the beginning, she was sort of desperate to have the kid because she didn't want to lose her chance. Yeah. But she wasn't, at her heart, really certain that that's what she wanted now. And she was afraid. And she sort of projected her uncertainty onto Neelix and really wanted to blame him for it. This is such a human thing that people do in relationships. You want to blame the other person for a decision. Then you don't have to make it yourself, right? Then it's somebody else's decision.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can be mad at them. And, she was mad at him because he didn't want to have the kid. And then when he did want to have the kid, she was like, oh, do I want to have the kid? So I thought that was actually pretty good.
Well, the doctor touched on that as well when he was talking to her, saying the urge for these things can be absolutely overriding.
Yeah.
And then Kes was bringing up wasn't that where your brain and intellect comes in to help you?
Yes. Well, you hope so. But your brain and intellect can be so overridden by emotion in many situations.
Yeah.
This was just one of those silly episodes of Star Trek that you can't not have. I think if you have the 8 and 10 episode seasons, you don't do stuff like this.
Right.
But this is almost an important part of Trek that you have these goofball episodes. I did this presentation at work where we talk about our hobbies. And so I was talking about this podcast, and many of the people in that presentation or in that meeting knew what Star Trek was, but many people didn't. And so I just had like a one slide thing sort of explaining what people who watch Star Trek know about Star Trek. And one of the things I had is there are some of these episodes that are the greatest thing that have ever been on television, but there are also these episodes that are so ridiculous. But we accept it because it is part of Star Trek. And this to me is an example of that. It's just like, it's so silly. It's so ridiculous. When they're doing the roll to show the ship is submissive. And it's so, and when her hands are covered in orange goo, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's like, all right.
Oh, I totally understand what you mean.
Moving on. There's not much to say about women in the future. I don't think we overdid this thing about all women wanting to have babies. I don't think we did that. I think we actually showed a person uncertain and that because of health reasons, she might be forced into a decision before she wants to. So, that kind of stuff at a philosophical level, I thought was handled okay. And looking in Janeway's leadership corner, there's some goofy stuff going on with leaders in this episode.
Right.
One of them is Chakotay thinking somehow he's going to stop people from having relationships and hooking up. That is not going to happen. But I do think you should be talking about it and be prepared for it. Right. Because you are going to have to deal with toxic relationships that when they come to an end, you have to keep people separated somehow.
And just leading on from that, the doctor was talking about certain races' cultural norms. What if you have people on Voyager and one of the cultural norms is that, you reach 25 and you have a child, and it's part of their culture or their belief, and Starfleet, recognizes that and supports it. You have somebody on the ship. How do you get around that without denying that person's culture, society, beliefs, whatever?
Yeah.
You'd have to accommodate them.
And Star Trek is set up to handle those kinds of stories.
Yeah.
And they should. We could have made that what this episode was about, but that's not what we did. The only other thing in Leadership Corner is I do appreciate that Kes looked to Janeway as the parent in the situation. I think that makes sense. And I think she kind of treats Kes that way, where she is pretty soft with her, but also allows her to be on the ship, allows her to learn and be a part of the crew, really. Right. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I did think Janeway's joke at the end was not appropriate for the captain. I get why it's funny, but you can't be saying stuff like that for the same reason that the captain can't pair off.
What about the Wildman scene at the end?
Janeway handled that scene as well as she could have. What else are you going to say in that situation? And I think, if I were in that situation, I would say the same thing, like, congratulations. There's nothing you can do about it. I suppose there is something you can do about it. But as the captain in that moment, that is the best thing to do, is to just support the person in whatever it is that they want to do going forward. And if you aren't positive in that moment, now you're not giving her hope. What do I always say? Trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Yeah. You have to give the people on your team those things. And she needs to give her hope because you could see she was terrified. She was sad that she didn't have her husband with her.
Right.
And she was terrified of raising a kid on the ship, and especially if that kid's going to be the only one. So she was really uncomfortable and didn't know what to do. She came in there saying, I feel like, it's my responsibility to tell you about this. But really, that was probably not it. She was looking for somebody to support her and help her. And that's what Janeway did. So that was the right thing to do, I would say, as the leader in that situation.
Yeah, I like the scene.
But when somebody told me recently that their wife was pregnant, I said, congratulations.
I think that's the mark of a good leader, Kim.
Oh, thank you so much. Again, what am I going to say? Do you know what caused it? No.
Do you need a diagram?
Oh, my goodness. And maybe also I'll mention Tuvok. I thought Tuvok did give some pretty good advice to Neelix, and it was very straightforward and very calm, and I thought it was pretty even, and he also didn't let Neelix get away with saying, I can't offer anything for a daughter. It's like, okay, dumbass. He didn't let him get away with that, so that was good. So like I said, there were some good things in this episode. It wasn't all terrible. But let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
This one is so tough. And I feel bad for the actor. Neelix makes me want to give it a thumbs down. And I understand. Just the silly writing, it really points me to want to give it a thumbs down. But the positive, the good bits in it, Janeway, Tuvok, the generational ship, these things, they just lift it up, so I'm going neutral. Wow. I won't actually say thumbs down, even though the Neelix side of it was just grating. Would I watch it again? Only if you made me.
I think when she held up her hands with the orange goo on them, I was just like, oh my God, this episode. What are we doing? If this had been a Deep Space Nine episode, I would be like, oh man, thumbs down. Terrible.
Yeah.
But there probably also would have been 100 insults to women in a Deep Space Nine episode that we didn't have here. Like I said, this was pretty even in its treatment of women, which is sort of amazing in 1995. So it wasn't insulting and disgusting and awful. It wasn't all those things that I would get so mad about on Deep Space Nine sometimes, especially in the early seasons. But I do think this is pretty dumb overall. When she's cramming the bugs in her mouth and she's covered in sweat the whole episode, and Neelix, this thing with Neelix is god awful. Yeah. He is the wrong character to be linked with this other character.
Yeah, agreed.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
So I'm going to thumbs down it. Whoa. Have I seen worse Star Trek episodes? Yes, I have.
Yeah.
But I didn't like it and I don't want to watch it again. I'm good. But it's not the worst we've seen.
No.
But it's probably the worst of the Voyager episodes we've seen. Maybe the Cloud is worse.
Yeah, the Cloud might be worse.
I don't want to give them all a break and say, okay, this is just okay. I mean, this is okay, but the Neelix part is not.
Yeah, it just squeaked in a neutral for me.
All right. I understand.
If the wind blows the wrong way, it could be a thumbs down.
Well, I get it. Even like listening back to the 37s, I think, it was too easy on that episode.
I know what you mean.
It's hard because we just like Star Trek and we don't want to give thumbs down.
Yeah.
But I can't deny this episode is not good.
No, it is not a shining example of Trek writing.
No. I really hoped after last week we were on the way up, but apparently we were not.
Few bumps in the road.
Okay, that wraps up Season 1, Episode 4. Come back next week for Episode 5. In the meantime, if you want to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us on the social medias. We are at ReBingeIT on the thing that used to be called Twitter, Threads, YouTube, and Instagram. And you can also talk to us through Facebook, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.